Illinois congressional races could be key to control of the U.S. House. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. We have a special election season show today and a panel of people who know a lot about the scene in Illinois and federally, and I'm really happy to have them here as we look forward to the November 6th election, for those who haven't voted early already. With me, I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register, and with me today, Kent Redfield, Professor Emeritus, Political Science at University of Illinois Springfield, and an expert on campaign finance. Welcome, Kent.
Good to be here.
Jamey Dunn, who sometimes sits in this chair, but I have more gray hair, so I get to do it today. Jamey is Bureau Chief at the State House of Illinois Issues Magazine. Glad to have you sitting with us today.
Glad to be here, Bernie.
And Chris Mooney, Political Science Professor, University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Bernie.
I started talking at the beginning of the show about congressional races, and I know that both political parties nationally are looking at Illinois and saying, like the Democrats say, we need to pick up 25 U.S. House seats to take control of the U.S. House. I don't know with the presidential race, as close as it is, if that's going to happen. But Democrats who drew the map were certainly hopeful that they could pick up 5 seats in Illinois that they lost last election 2 years ago. Any chance of this happening?
Look like the Democrats will run the table, but clearly because they were able to draw the map and because they actually lost a number of seats in 2010, so they didn't have to protect a lot of incumbents, they drew a very aggressive map. And clearly the Democrats thought they were going to have a chance to pick up potentially 5 seats. Now they assumed that Representative Costello would not retire. And so
right.
Now we've got a seat that was held by a Democrat that's also in play. So this is ground zero for kind of potential shift in the control of the House of Representatives, but it's also probably the most expensive state, per race. We've got 5 of the top 15 races in terms of independent expenditures nationally are taking place in Illinois, including the one up in the Quad Cities to Rockford. The Boustros
versus Bobby Schilling.
Right. Yeah, is the third.
Sherry, and that's, of course, has a Springfield connection because Sherry Bustos, who is on, I think, the East Moline City Council, her parents live in Springfield, Gene and Ann Callahan.
Yep, and likely to be $7 million plus in independent expenditures and another $4 million from the candidates, so probably $11 million for a congressional seat.
And this is a perfect example because that Bobby Schilling was kind of Tea Party friendly a couple years ago and beat an incumbent Democrat, Phil Hare, and that was part of a big Republican sweep a couple years ago. The 13th congressional district, which takes in much of Springfield and goes to Bloomington, Champaign, Edwardsville, that's been a big race of interest in Central Illinois and certainly to Springfield, which Springfield will now have parts of 2 congressional districts, the new 13th and the new 18th, where we've been split into 3. We had 17th Phil Hare, which became Bobby Schilling, but that's now going to be completely Western Illinois. We have Rodney Davis of Taylorville, who was for 16 years an aide to Congressman John Shimkus. David Gill, a doctor from Bloomington. There's also an independent in the race, John Hartman from Edwardsville. How's that one looking, Jamey?
Well, I think that this race really illustrates the point that Professor Redfield just made about an aggressive map. I mean, looking at the possibility of David Gill, it's pretty neck and neck, we really don't know, possibly being elected a fairly liberal Democrat in a district that used to contain Tim Johnson's district. It's not something that you normally would expect from the demographics here. So the Democrats definitely kind of carved something out. They carved a possibility out for themselves here, and it could happen. We don't really know. There's conflicting polls. One is saying Gill is up, and the other one is saying Davis is up, so it's going to be a nail-biter.
Yeah, Chris, it's interesting that there was a guy, this John Hartman, collected 8,000 signatures to get himself on the ballot. He's an independent on the ballot. He's kind of greenish politically, you know, and worrying about the environment.
Aquamarine.
Yes. I was talking about as if he were Green Party, but he says he's been an independent for, you know, decades. In a race like that, does that matter? Does he perhaps take more from one or the other candidates, or will he be a factor? He won't take, by the way, more than, and I think I'll get back to Kent on this race, because I know how there was millions and millions of dollars being spent for the Democrat and the Republican. Mr. Hartman, last I saw, had like $7,000 collected and will not take more than $20 from any individual. Is an independent a factor?
Well, independents, there's a big controversy about whether or not independents have an impact, or third-party candidates, and there was a lot of political science study, especially of the Ross Perot races in '92 in particular, but also '96, and really the results are to some extent inconclusive. They weren't really sure in that particular set of races whether or not Perot hurt Bush or hurt Dole and favored Clinton. The thing we are pretty sure about is when there's a well-known third-party candidate who has a clear ideological dimension that is along the same lines as sort of basic left-right continuum, then there can be an impact. So, for example, in 2000 presidential race, you've got Ralph Nader. Everybody knows who Ralph Nader is, in his crumpled suits and the Corvairs and all that. He is, you know, tacking to the left of Al Gore in pretty clear way, and so it was pretty. You could say that and studies have shown that if he would have been on the ballot in Florida, then we would be talking about, you know, at least 4 years of President Gore. But when there's a candidate who is unknown or not well known, or again off the regular left-right track, like a libertarian or a Green Party, you know, the odds that they're just going to split down, you know, those who voted for him would have either voted for a Democrat or Republican pretty evenly, or not voted at all.
Yeah, I think maybe they get the protest vote sometimes. Maybe, like, I don't like either of these guys that are running all these negative ads or having their friends run all these negative ads.
So it could be an impact, but I don't think it's an impact we can predict the direction of.
Yeah, I think, I remember the Ross Perot race, and I think money has something to do with it. He, of course, had millions of dollars to throw in.
That's why he was so well known.
Because if you don't advertise, like Mr. Hartman, you know, I think philosophically it's a fine idea, but if you don't advertise and you're covering 14 counties, you know, even if you don't advertise for a local race, you know, for mayor of a small town, nobody's going to know you unless you knock on every door. Speaking of money, Kent, do you have any figures on money being spent in the 13th, and is that one of the top, like, 5 or 6 in the country?
Yeah, you've got probably $5 million and counting independent, another couple of million that are out of the candidate's own fundraising. They're both challengers. Incumbents traditionally are able to raise a lot of money because they're an incumbent, and so they generally have bigger war chests, but where you've got two challengers in an open seat. So you're getting, for every dollar that's coming out of the candidates, another $2 is being spent by independent groups, and so you've gotten what everybody in Central Illinois and throughout the whole district sees. There's this constant barrage of negative ads. You know, if you know something about the content of the ads, your reaction is, you know, will people please stop lying to me? Because
both sides.
Yeah,
right?
Both sides. I mean, it kind of runs from intellectually dishonest to just dishonest in terms of, but these are people that are from outside the district. They're spending money. They care about who controls Congress. They really don't care very much about who's representing the 13th district or what happens after the election, and you get these kind of campaigns. And so we've pretty much, you know, we've been subjected to that, as have been the voters in a lot of other congressional districts in Illinois. Yeah. It's a lot of outside money.
Well, the 13th is interesting, and as we've alluded to, Tim Johnson was a long time, for 10 years or 12, I guess, the congressman from the old 15th district. He was running in the new 13th. He won the primary and then dropped out, just saying personal reasons, and it doesn't look like anything terrible happened, but he's out. Rodney Davis got appointed the Republican. David Gill ran 3 times earlier against Tim Johnson, but in a much more Republican district, and the new district, as Jamey mentioned, is at least tilts a little bit Democratic, so there's a chance there. But there is such a clear difference between these two people because Rodney, you know, I don't want to raise taxes on anybody. David Gill, Obamacare does not go far enough. He actually has been in an organization of physicians that seek a national health care program. So you have the two, a very big choice, plus the independent. So we'll see that go. About the negative ads, and why do people use negative ads so much? Just a general question. Does it show, do studies show that they have to do this?
I mean, there's mixed results as to whether it works or not. So, Professor Mooney, you probably know a little bit better than I do on this as far as what the studies prove out. But generally, I think it's pretty mixed, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the most recent research shows that it's a fairly short-term effect, right? It doesn't last more than a couple of weeks. But I think one of the things about campaigning is, you know, there's an old saying that half the money spent on a campaign is wasted, but nobody knows which half. So if you've got more money than Midas to throw at this thing, what else can, you know, how much more can you do? And you know, the negative with the positive, and it's actually it's much easier to be negative, I think, than to be positive, because all you have to do is find a few demonizing points on your opponent. And
a black and white picture or two, perhaps.
Yeah,
a little
right.
fuzzy.
Maybe if there's a former governor in the vicinity that you can throw up there, it all, you know. And
they're all in jail, aren't they? Oh, no.
And
sorry,
you know, around here,
yeah,
you know, the previous examples in Illinois where this has been done successfully. I mean, the poster child for this was 2006 with Rob Blagojevich. The guy was virtually, I mean, chapter and verse written in the paper. We knew. And all the stuff he was, well, not the stuff he was convicted for, because that hadn't quite happened yet, but for many very similar things, and just by dint of character assassination, Judy Bart Topinka, he managed to, even though he didn't get 50%, he made her look so bad that sort of almost 10% of the people voted for the Green Party candidate, who nobody, you know, they didn't know who he was, and you know, so. It works in some extent.
I remember Rich Whitney, yes. But and the Blagojevich campaign, I guess, showed a nice picture of Judy Bart Topinka doing the polka with George Ryan. So,
yeah, just quick comment. I mean, if your negatives are high, then what practitioners will tell you is that it's much easier to raise your opponent's negatives than to improve your positives.
Gotcha.
And Blagojevich is the classic example of dirtying up your opponent. In fact, some of the exit polls showed that of the people that cared about corruption, that a slight majority of them voted for Blagojevich.
Because Judy Bart,
because
all of the ads that
convinced them that.
When you say care about corruption, you mean disliked it?
No, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, because Blagojevich was so good at raising money that he ran all these ads saying, Judy Bart Topinka, what's she thinking? And people thought she was worse than him because all they see is the TV ads.
Well, the negative
Unless
ads,
they watch this show.
and the negative ads are definitely nothing new, but the super PACs, the ability to distance yourself from the money and the people who are putting out those ads make it all that much more easy for candidates to do this.
Right.
Because then they don't, if somebody else is paying for it, you don't have to go on in and say, I approve this ad.
That's right, and you can say I had nothing to do with it.
That's right.
I'm going to mention just a couple more congressional races because was the lieutenant governor candidate with Bill Brady. We all look up to Jason because he's 6'8". He's the Republican in the 12th district in Southern Illinois, and Bill Enyart, who was the adjutant general, if I pronounced that right, of the Illinois National Guard before stepping down from that to run as the Democratic candidate. They're involved in a big battle in Southern Illinois to replace Jerry Costello.
Yes.
And how's that one looking? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, again, these are the polls are within the margin of error. It's a close race, expensive, you know, but maybe $6 million, you know, in terms of what's likely to be out there.
Wow.
And it is a district that was crafted to re-elect Costello, who's a conservative Democrat, and that's the problem that you have in Southern Illinois with congressional districts and with down legislative districts. You know, used to be a lot more Democrats, used to be conservative Democrats got elected from downstate, and now as downstate becomes more conservative, when the old Democratic incumbent leaves, Gary Hanningly is, you can call the roll, then often they get replaced by a Republican who's beating a conservative Democrat, but the voters who have been voting Republican presidentially, gubernatorial, they look and they say, if I'm going to vote for Republican, I'll vote for the real Republican. So it's a problem, whether or not the Republicans, Democrats are going to be able to hold that district.
Interesting. The other race of kind of national interest, I'm going to mention Joe Walsh. He was kind of a surprise winner 2 years ago. Tea Party is from the north suburbs of Chicago, and he's running against Tammy Duckworth now, who lost both legs when her helicopter was shot down in, was it Iraq? Iraq. And actually, Rod Blagojevich named her head of Department of Veterans Affairs for a while, so there's a linkage to him, but she's the Democrat, and Joe Walsh is one who makes many statements, very critical, very publicly, of President Obama and other Democrats, and sometimes gets into, he just says odd things and ends up on TV a lot. It's just an interesting race. Where's that one going?
Well, that one too. I mean, there's 6 of them that are within the margin of error according to the most recent polls. She was expected to do better, I think. She's turned out to be a sort of a disappointment, I think, for the Democrats as a candidate. And in fact, that's been the case, for example, in the Enyart Plummer race as well, and maybe in 1 or 2 other ones. She's got almost the perfect resume for a congressional candidate in that area. But she apparently is not making smart choices in the conduct of her campaign, not listening to people.
Also.
She's not as
well. That's the wrong thing to say.
Yeah,
about her,
she's and Joe Walsh, he's a bomb thrower, and he from time to time will throw bombs that hit, and sometimes they miss, and sometimes they blow up in his face. And he's recently made some comments about things that are going to make people mad in that district, and so he should be farther behind than he is. That's a race that she should have won.
I think he said that there's no medical reason for abortion to ever save the life of the mother, and then
it's hard to keep track of all the Republican congressional candidates are saying things like that, so I didn't
certainly the liberal talk shows that made it quickly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Want to mention the presidential race a little bit. While we have all of these millions of dollars being spent on negative ads in congressional races in Illinois, we have not been lucky enough in central Illinois to see the presidential ads unless they're on cable, because they're not spending on networks here because everybody assumes President Obama will take Illinois. Does anyone not? It's funny. Rosemarie Long, the Republican county chairman in Sangamon County, where Springfield is, says, after the first presidential debate, Romney signs were flying out the door. They've been getting lawn signs. Everybody wants them. There's enthusiasm. And I actually heard her say at a meeting, maybe Illinois will go the other way. That might be a Springfield perspective. What do you think?
I think that's probably a stretch. But I mean, the newfound enthusiasm for Romney after the debates could help local candidates and legislative candidates, could help Republicans get out to vote locally. So that could be something that might be an impact. But as far as the presidential race, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
The president is in Chicago for a photo op today to do early voting,
right?
To show that
as we tape the show on Thursday,
that if the president can just drop in and early vote, then everybody else can early vote. But that's really that kind of thing that will get popped nationally. I think they're pretty much done fundraising. That's the only time we saw Governor Romney was to raise money, and so they're pretty much ignoring Illinois, and no one is far enough ahead that they can come in and do a personal appearance for a candidate this for the Senate or for the House this late in the race. They're going to live in those.
Speaking of the president, though, and with the Obamacare arguments and all of the fear about it because of TV ads, whatever, downstate Democrats. Would they want that to happen anyway? Would they want the president to be there? Or perhaps Governor Quinn, who's closing state facilities downstate? I mean, you have a really, it's not nationally there's one set of values and rules, but I'm not sure that the downstate Democrats in particular want the top of the ticket people, although the governor's not on the ballot this time, to be with them.
It's a pretty stark contrast between how long has it been since Governor Edgar has been in office? He's doing robocalls, he's doing endorsements, he's still a brand name. And that's what a good governor does for you, is that he's able to have that brand name that you can share, or a successful governor, let's just say it that way. And Governor, there really isn't anybody that Governor Quinn can help at this point. And so that's, that really is a problem.
But Governor Edgar still does have that Charleston pronunciation of Washington, which he says 3 times in the Rodney Davis ad.
Hey, I'm from that neck of the woods, and I say Washington.
Well, okay, there you go.
But I mean, there are people like Gary Forby's basically running against Pat Quinn right now.
Yeah,
not quite, but
Democratic
yes.
Senator.
I mean, he's had a lot of press releases go out and push back on the prison closings. So
actually, Andy Manar, who is a candidate for Illinois Senate, and Senate President Cullerton's former chief of staff, and also Macoupin County Board Chairman, he's running against Mike McElroy, the Republican mayor of Decatur, and he's got a picture of Pat Quinn saying McElroy will do to your schools what Pat Quinn wants to do through consolidation. I mean, you're right. It's just that way. I wanted to move on to something a little esoteric or unexpected on the ballot this time. There is a constitutional amendment on the Illinois ballot, and Jamey, I know you've written about this in the magazine. It involves pensions. It is very long. Could you describe what it is? Because there's a lot of. I
pull my notes out. It's that confusing.
There you go. Which way is this going? Why is it there? And what are the concerns?
Well, everyone has probably gotten a little blue pamphlet in the mail from the Secretary of State's office explaining this, and if you threw it away or didn't understand it, don't feel too bad, because it's very complicated. Basically, what it would do is raise the requirement for adding to pension benefits. Right now, the legislature can do it with a simple majority, and it would raise that requirement to a 3/5 vote. The legislature passed it. I think there were like 2 people who voted against it, so it was very popular in the legislature. Not as popular with some of the groups that have been analyzing it since. They're saying it probably wouldn't do that much, that these kind of benefits have passed on much higher margins in the past, and that it's actually quite confusing and may cause some legal issues, may cause lawsuits going forward. My feeling is, though, that folks probably will just see it as a pension reform and I think it'll probably do fairly well. There's
some fear that it could somehow impede or change pension benefits for people already retired. Is there any thoughts about that, or do we know?
It seems quite unlikely that would be the case. There is a theory that has been espoused by a couple of people, but it's more a matter of confusion and paranoia, probably because of the people that are espousing this are those who are either in the public employee retirement system getting benefits or will soon do, and so they are worried that something's funny going on around here. By and large, this is strictly a feel-good move by the legislature to
say they
show
did
that
something about pensions.
We're fixing pensions. Here it is. And not only is it something that they did, but then they can put it on make it a constitutional amendment, so it's on the ballot, so everybody gets this thing in the mail, and everybody knows that's going on. It's not just some vote that they took that they have to put on a mailer. In the end, I mean, lawyers are going to make some money on it if it gets to pass, and they have to litigate the thing.
Doesn't that always
but that's about
and
about it.
It's the union, so ASME, the retirees, they voiced opposition. The unions are voicing opposition, and that actually is a plus. I mean, for the people that the Democrats have put on the ballot, because there's something on the ballot about pensions. The unions are against it. It must be a good thing, and so we have this flurry of activity that it's all perspective. I mean, it would be harder to do an early retirement, but we're not going to do that. It would be harder to create a new class of favored employees, like the lobbyists for the teachers union that got into the pension system. But we're not going to do that. And so it's all, school boards, it would be more difficult to give sweeteners, but we're not going to do it.
Okay, I'm going to transition. We only have a few minutes left. I want to mention just a couple of interesting legislative races. I mentioned Andy Manar versus Mike McElroy in the 48th. Any idea where that's going, people?
Menard's up a little in the polls, but it's very competitive, and it was very difficult for the Democrats to find enough Democrats downstate to win especially in the Senate district or in the 13th in the congressional district. They're probably safer in the smaller district with the House district that goes from Springfield to Decatur.
And that would be
Sue Scher and Andy Shackelford.
Sue Scher and Dennis Shackelford.
Dennis Shackelford.
Right.
Dennis owns the Hallmark card shops in Springfield, and Sue Scher teaches school, grade school. And how's that looking? Mike Madigan has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get Sue Scher elected through mailers, and she's been not very visible.
Well,
and Dennis hasn't been visible either, even though the
No.
Republicans said they would help him, but she's on TV, he's not.
Yeah, she's basically sitting on a lead, not giving any interviews. The best indication is that the Democrats have spent $500,000. The House Republicans have probably spent less than $25,000. So they don't see it as a good prospect. But the reason the Menard-McElroy race is close is that the other half of the district is going to overwhelmingly reelect Wayne Rosenthal. It's very Republican,
rep.
and so they've got this. It's very, one very Democratic half, one very Republican half, very competitive Senate race. Could be already over $2 million in terms of both sides in that Senate race.
Wow.
And DiMuzio, Sam McCann was about 2.7, and the most expensive ever in Illinois, and this one may get there, particularly when we have independent expenditures. The manufacturers are in it now through a super PAC.
Right, and now Sam McCann in the 50th district is running unopposed, and Larry Bomke, who's a longtime state senator from Springfield, is out because he is retiring and will sell insurance full time. There are a lot of local, interesting local races too, like the Tony Libri, Kristen DeCenzo circuit clerk's race in Springfield. There's competing ads on mostly radio, a little bit of TV. Well, we are just about out of time, but everybody has time to vote, if you have not already, because it's coming up on November 6th. I'd like to thank Kent Redfield, Jamey Dunn, and Chris Mooney for sharing this time with me, and like to thank you also. Enjoy voting, and I'm Bernie Schoenburg. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.